After wishing you Shavua Tov, we begin now the fourth parak, Ein Ben Amudar Hanoah, on the bottom of Amid Beis, Limudar Heimenu Machal. So the Mishnah is comparing and contrasting two cases. One is where he prohibits Hanoah from Chavero, and the other case is where he prohibits Machal, only Machal. Hanoah's Machal. And what's the difference between the two? Eladrisas Haregel V'Kelim Shein Osim B'Hem Ochol Nefesh. So once you have a Mudar Hanoah case, then the scope of the Isur is greater than that of Mudar Mimenu Machal in two ways. Number one, Mudar Hanoah Mechavero, he's prohibiting upon himself any benefit from his friend, even to use his friend's backyard, so to speak, as a shortcut to get to where he has to go. And he's not allowed to benefit from his friend's vessels that have nothing to do with Ochel Nefesh. If they have to do with Ochel Nefesh, as we'll see in the rest of the Mishnah, the Sefer of the Mishnah, then even in the case of Mudar Mimenu Machal, we don't limit that Isur to Machal, but even to that which brings Machal, those vessels, utensils that are singled out and designated for Achila purposes. So the nafkamina between the two cases in our Mishnah is going to be Kelim She'ein Osem B'Hem Ochel Nefesh. And now the Mishnah clarifies. Hamudar Machal Michavero Lo Yashilenu Nafa Ukvara V'Reichayim V'Tanu. There's the list of 4 different types of vessels that are dedicated for, in the case of Nafa, of sifting, sifting the flour, and Kvara is a, let's say, also kind of sieve, but it's got larger holes, so it is used to remove the chaff from the grains. And then we have a mill or an oven for baking bread. So these are all what we call Mishamshim Hachanas Machal. They are Mishamshim, they serve for the purpose of preparing food, and they're included under the scope of Mudar Machal. Avo Mashalo Chaluk V'Tavas V'Talos Nizamin, with those kalim like clothing and jewelry, or a garment, an outer garment, the talis, nizamin, also kinds of jewelry. These are not used at all for tzarchei machal, and therefore they're only included in the first case of the Mishnah of Mudar Hanoah Mechavero. So the Gemara now analyzes. Man Tana, which Tana of our Mishnah says that a Mudar Hanoah, even something as minimum as traversing through his backyard as a shortcut to where he wants to get to, even that, which most people are not makbid on, but nevertheless it's considered and classified as Hanoah, and it's included in the Isur Hanoah. Rav Adbarav Rabbi Lezer he. The Sanya Rabbi Lezer Omer Afilu Vitur also the Mudar Hanoah. So we have now machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rav Bonon. And they argue exactly about how to classify Hanoah with regard to the Nedarim. For example, there's a case of Vitur. Let's say I sell you something and you're paying the price for, let's say, 5 bushels, but I want to attract you as a buyer and have a good relationship with you, so I add an extra half a bushel above and beyond what you're paying for. Right, it's like when I was a kid, they used to give you gifts if you sign up for a bank. You know what I mean? Oh, I finally found my calendar. Okay. So what is this case of vitur? Vitur means something I'm a vater on. That's the mocher is more than happy to add a little bit, to get you as a good client. When you're favor, you'll come back again to buy again. So the question is whether that additional amount of whatever it might be, grains or flour, whatever I'm selling you, that addition above beyond you're paying for, is that also the hana in the case of mudar hana? And Rabbi Eliezer goes very far, and he says even on vitur, that which the mocher gives you the extra amount in a sale, even that's considered hana, and therefore it's also in a case of mudar hana. In our Mishnah, even something as insignificant that people aren't makbid on, like going through his backyard as a shortcut, even that's considered hana, and therefore it's also mudar hana, reflecting the shita of Rabbi Eliezer. The Mishnah says, "Hamudar machal michaver lo yashi lenu." He's not to borrow from him. Napot, kvara, rechaim, v'tanu. These are kelim hamishamshim lachmanas ochal. Now we start the daf for today. Lamed Gimel. And the Gemara asks, "V'ha min machal noda." He took on no not to benefit from machal. He didn't take on no that would prohibit him from benefiting from the kelim that are used as mishamshim fachanas ochel. The Gemara answers, "Lakish." You have to reinterpret the Mishnah. But Omer, the Mishnah is talking about a situation where he says, "Hanas macholcha olai." And once he adds the extra word hanas, says Reish Lakish, his intention is to prohibit all hana that brings about machal, that prepares and improves the food. So the Gemara asks, Ema, how do you know that when he adds the word hana, he's going as far as to prohibit on himself any kind of vessel that will be used in the context of food? Perhaps, maybe what he had in mind was to prohibit taking chitim, and they used to use chitim when they softened it up with moisture as a refuah, to put it as a salve over a wound, and maybe that's also considered hanas macholcha when he takes that neder with the broader language of hanas malcha, that he's benefiting from something that's edible, even though he's benefiting it not as achila, but rather as refuah. But if you talk about kelim, that far he didn't go. Omar Rava. So Rava now really, sets it all out. It's got to be an explicit neder. The Omer, the Mishnah is talking about a case where he declares hana hamivia lidei macholcha olai, teoser olai. Any benefit that would bring to achila, that's considered included in the Isser Hana, the neder that he took upon himself, and therefore the Hana from the Kalim, who these are Kalim Mishamshim Lachanas Nachal, they're also included in his neder. One would wonder if perhaps Reish Lakish was not happy with Rava's interpretation of the Mishnah, because according to Rava, we can sort of ask the question, Maika Mashmal Pshita, if he actually spelled it out in such a way explicitly, Hana Mevil Lidei Machol Cholai, so that L'chora would certainly include Kalim. Omer Rav Papa says, Sak lahavi peros, chamor lahavi olav peros, vafilu sana of the alma, hana mevil lidei machal. Once we've accepted Rava's interpretation of our Mishnah, that the formulation of his neder was any benefit that will bring to food, then if he borrows a keli that's used as a way of filling up the keli in order to transport food from place to place, like a sack, or even to use an animal as a beast of burden to bring fruits or grains, and for that matter, even to borrow a basket, a tzana is a basket, a sal, all this is included under Hana Mevil Lidei Machal, and it's all included in the neder. So the chiddush here of Rav Papa says the Ran, and also it's in Tosas Rid, Shlo Tomar Shadafka Kelim of Yuchodim Lachonis Machal. All the kelim that are listed are kelim that are designated exclusively for preparing food, but even other kelim, if you want to use them for the purpose of food, that becomes awesome. Boy Rav Papa vacillated about the following question. Sus lirkov olav, v'tabas leiros b'maut. Is he allowed to benefit from this person by borrowing his horse, his friend's horse? So he was madar hano from his friend, and he's not using the horse specifically for preparing food or bringing food, transporting food, but rather to bring him to the banquet where he's going to eat food. Or when he shows up at the banquet, he wants to wear some ornate jewels so that people will respect him, and they'll put him at the head of the table, and they'll give him the best of the foods. They'll give him the steaks at the banquet. Now, another suffix, nifsak umezel be'aremai. If, let's say, he wants to make a kitzur derech, in which we said is not an osur in the case of machol, but he wants to use that kitzur derech to his friend's backyard in order to arrive at the banquet to eat. Shall we say that these are also included on the hanos hamavios l'dei machol? Tashma, the Gemara wants to answer this question by quoting our Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Our mashalo chaluk v'tabas v'talis v'nizom v'tabas tabaos techi domi." What's the case? What is he borrowing it for? If he's not borrowing them to show himself as an Adam Choshev, so they'll give him more food, they'll give him the best food in the place. It's Trichel and Meimer, you have to tell me that it's mutter. Why would I even think that it's also? He prohibited on himself machal. Elolav afilu leiros behen ukutari mashilo. Even if he wants to show himself up as a very choshev person, and therefore they'll give him the best food, nevertheless, that's too far removed from hanas machal, and it's mutter. And that's how we're going to be poshet the suffix of a popolo. The Gemara rejects it. We olam shaloli ros. He's not showing up with these beautiful kalim in order to get a better portion. But Ivy the Ketani Beresha lo yashilenu. Seifa mashilo. Tana seifa mashilo. Since in the Resha he's telling you that you're not allowed to borrow a nafa and a kvara and so forth and so on. Those are kalim that misham shemo kol nefesh. So he tells us in the Sefer that these are the kelim that you're allowed to borrow. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he's borrowing them for the purpose of enhancing his banquet, his eating at the banquet. So the Gemara doesn't come to any conclusion here about the suffix of Rav Papa. Ledina says the Ran lahalacha lechumra. However, if he violates such a neder, and he's nena on the, with a horse on his way to the banquet, then he doesn't get mal. The Mishnah says, "Kol dover shein osim bo kol nefesh." Now we're talking about something that's not mishamesh lachonas machol. It's makom shemaskirim kayotze ben osur. If these are kelim that are normally used for rental purposes, then even in the case of madir machol, these kelim are prohibited. Again, these are not kelim that are mishamshim lachonas ochel. But since normally what you do is you rent these kelim out, like for example, let's say you have ice skates at an ice skating rink, right, for rental purposes. So then the mudar is not allowed to accept that free of charge because he saves himself money, and the money itself he could have used to buy food. And this is going to lead us to the famous sugya of Mavriach Ari Minichse Chavero. These are not direct monetary gains. It's not like he's putting money into your bank account, he's really just saving you a loss because you would normally have to pay rental fees, and he's waiving the rental fees. So the Gemara wants to prove from our Mishnah, since the Mishnah says that a kli that's not dedicated for ochel, but it's a rental type of kli, that it's included under mudar mimenu machol, is michal dereisha at the beginning of the Mishnah, meaning the previous Mishnah that we studied today, that prohibits kalim that are mishamshim lachonas machol, that are designated for food, is afal pi she'ein maskirin, even though normally those kalim, a sieve, for example, would not normally be rented at a price. And what that means is that he's getting such a minimum kind of benefit here that you would think that that's not called hana. He borrows a sieve from his friend, and this is not even a sieve that usually you can rent out and get money for. So what's the big deal? Where's the significant hana? Rav Hadbarav again, Rabbi Eliezer. This is Rabbi Eliezer of Vitur, who says that Vitur Mekach, when the mocher adds a little bit extra on top, that's mutter. I'm sorry, that's also, even though the Chacham say it's mutter, because Rabbi Eliezer says that it's included on the hana. Strictly speaking, he got some benefit. So even if you have something that is not normally rented, so he's just lending it to you for a time being, nevertheless, you're getting hana from him, and that's the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer. The Mishnah says, "Hamudar hana mechavero shokelo eshiklo." What that means is you have a madir and a mudar. So let's call Ruvain is the madir and Shimon is the mudar. And the Mishnah is telling us that the madir, Ruvain, is allowed to give on behalf of the mudar the machzis hashekel that's collected annually for the Beis Hamikdash for the purpose of the Trumas Halishka, from which they took off the monies in order to buy Korbanos Tzibur. V'chein Porea Eschovo, the Madir, who prohibited Shimon from getting hana from him, is allowed to pay Shimon's debt. And l'chora, these two cases, these two didim that are classified by the Mishnah, are very difficult to understand. There's a madir and a mudar. How could the madir be so beneficial for the mudar by paying his machzah shekel or paying up his chol? Not only that, the Mishnah goes on to say, u'maksalo avidoso. If Ruvain the madir finds a lost object that was lost from Shimon, he's allowed to return it to Shimon. And it's not considered as if he's giving hana, which would put Shimon into a situation of a violation of the Iser Mudar Hana. So again, even though he's involved in a great deal of tircha on behalf of Shimon the Mudar in order to return his Aveda, let's say it's an animal, he has to take care of it, but nevertheless, he's doing it as a mitzvah, and he's not doing it for the purpose of being mahana him, of giving hana. However, there are places on the face of the earth of the Jewish communities that mokom shenotunaleschar, that if a person through Hashavas Aveda puts in a tremendous amount of work, and he might not be able to go to work that day, he has to cancel in, call in because he's not available, he's so involved. In any event, the Masechet took a loss, a financial loss, and the din is that notlin oleschar. He could take money. He could decide, look, I don't want to take money for the mitzvah and forfeit the mitzvah. But nevertheless, even if he does so, then the madir is doing a hana for the mudar by returning the aveda and not getting paid the money that he deserves to be paid to reimburse him for his loss. Tipol hana lehegdish. However, the mudar, who really saved himself a certain payment that he would be obligated to pay for the madir, for the machzir's aveda, should take that sum of money and he should dedicate it to Hegdish, so that will be the condition once it's fulfilled, to guarantee that the Mudar Shimon is not getting any benefit from Reuven, the Mad. And the Gemara is saying that this whole Mishnah that says that the Madir is allowed to pay up a Chov on behalf of the Mudar, or to pay up his Machzah Shekel Alma, is predicated on the position of Avruche Ari Bi'almahu B'Shari, that Mavriach Ari is Mutter. So it means if I save you a loss by getting rid of the lions and chasing them away, they're about to attack your flock of sheep, then you don't have to pay me for that. We'll see later on, the Gemara is going to call it Heiniach Ma'osav Al Keren Atzmi. Now, there's certain situations where I put out my money and my effort on your behalf, but I can't demand that you pay me. And therefore, Vishari, in the case of Madir Hanon, the Chavero, the Madir is allowed to pay up the Chov of the Mudar. Reuven was Madir Shimon, he can pay up Shimon's Chov or Bishokel or Shiklo, because he's only preventing him from a loss that he shouldn't have to pay up the Chov. That's called Mavriach Hari. It's not considered that he's being Mahanin. Mantana, who is the Tana of Mishnah who holds that Mavriach Ari is Shari, he cannot charge you for it, or it's not considered as if he's giving you Anah. Omer of Hoshaya, Zu, Divrei Hanani.